Texas's 6-week abortion ban has gone into effect after the Supreme Court and other federal courts failed to weigh in on this measure. Now, the legislation is effective today, and it means that individuals, women who happen to be pregnant but want to get an abortion, will not be able to do so if they are past 6 weeks of pregnancy. But believe it or not, that's not even the worst provision that's part of this law. In fact, let me give you the details on what else this law does and how it will effectively shut down most of the abortion clinics, if not all of the abortion clinics and providers within the state of Texas. Now, the lack of judicial intervention means that the law, which is one of the strictest in the nation and bans abortion before many even know that they're pregnant, goes into force absent further court intervention. The law allows private citizens to bring civil suits against anyone who assists a pregnant person seeking an abortion in violation of the ban. There's no exception for rape or incest, although there is an exception for medical emergencies. Now, the Supreme Court could have weighed in on this. They chose not to, which is an issue. They didn't say, well, we reject the case, we're not gonna hear it. They just haven't weighed in at all. And of course, there's a lawsuit by the very abortion providers that this is impacting that has made its way to the federal courts, but the federal courts haven't weighed in on it yet. Now, the Supreme Court is poised to hear a case involving the restrictive abortion law in Mississippi. That's the law that bans abortions past 15 weeks. And the way that they rule on that will really have a huge impact on how this situation in Texas plays out. But Whole Women's Health, which operates clinics in McAllen, McKinney, Austin, and Fort Worth, and led the federal lawsuit challenging the ban, said that it was only offering the procedure if, quote, no embryonic or fetal cardiac activity is detected in the sonogram. In fact, I wanna give you guys a few tweets that they put out to give you a sense of the panic that women were feeling in the state of Texas just yesterday before this law came into effect. Whole Women's Health CEO has said that we have staff and doctors providing abortions in Texas still at this hour, and they are all in to provide care until 11:59 p.m. tonight, just before midnight, of course. Our waiting rooms are filled with patients and their loved ones right now. And a subsequent tweet reads the following: the anti-abortion protesters are outside, shining lights on the parking lot. We are under surveillance. This is what abortion care looks like, human rights warriors. Now, of course, that last part was sarcastic. These are not human rights warriors at all. These are people who feel emboldened by the vigilante provision that's included in this law, the one that essentially encourages private citizens, not just in Texas, but across the entire country, to essentially surveil their fellow Americans and turn them in to authorities in Texas if they suspect that someone is driving a woman to a clinic to get an abortion, or if they suspect that a woman is going over to an abortion clinic and she might be past 6 weeks, or if they suspect that an abortion clinic is not abiding by this ridiculous draconian law. And so it pits Americans against one another as if we're not already living in a climate where Americans are tearing each other apart. And what's even more disgusting about this law is what it's based on. This lie that the very lawmakers who passed it somehow have a genuine concern about human lives. You know, they're just trying to save babies. In reality, these are politicians who couldn't care less about human lives, and I think that their behavior during the pandemic has made that abundantly clear. These are politicians who are just pandering. You know, they're big panda bears, looking out for their political interests, trying to pander to the evangelical vote, conservative voters, moronic single issue voters who think that this is the most important issue in the world, that human life, this is about human lives, everybody, this is about human lives. All right, let's talk a little bit about human lives for a second, okay? Let's take a quick look at what a pregnant woman's what a pregnant woman is carrying at 7 weeks. This isn't 6 weeks, we'll give them an extra week. At 7 weeks, this is what the pregnant woman is dealing with. I don't believe that's a human. Humans are able to live, breathe, function appropriately outside of a woman's womb. In fact, I initially believed that at this stage, it was referred to as a fetus, but I was actually wrong about that. It's actually the embryonic period. That's how early in the pregnancy we're talking about. The embryonic period of development lasts from 2 weeks after conception through the 8th week, during which time the organism is known as an embryo. At the 9th week post-conception, the fetal period begins. From this point until birth, the organism is known as a fetus. So we're not even talking about a fetus. We're certainly not talking about a human life. The only human life that's being impacted here is the woman who is forced to carry a pregnancy to term because a bunch of lawmakers in the state of Texas wanted to suck up to the evangelical vote. That's the only reason why they did this. And by the way, I don't hear the evangelical voters who claim that they care about human lives up in arms about the failed policies in states like Texas that have led to tens of thousands of Texans dying during this pandemic, deaths that could have been prevented. And I actually do want to talk about that a little more. Why don't we take a look at how many Texans have died in the duration of this pandemic because of people like Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, certainly Governor Greg Abbott. Texas has had a total of 3.6 million coronavirus cases. In terms of deaths, they're losing about, on average, 230 Texans a day at a time when those deaths could easily be prevented. And a total number of deaths right now stands at 57,205. And so, maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm being unfair to the lawmakers who on one hand claim that they care deeply about embryos. But on the other hand, when it comes to living, breathing human beings, they don't seem to care much at all. Maybe it's not their fault that more than 57,000 Texans died during the pandemic. And then I remember that early on, about 2 weeks after the shutdowns happened in response to COVID in 2020, you had someone like Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick saying the quiet parts out loud, letting us know exactly what he genuinely feels about human lives. Let's watch.
We're crushing the markets. We're crushing this country. And what I said when I was with you that night, there are more important things than living. And that's saving this country for my children and my grandchildren and saving this country for all of us. And I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But man, we got to take some risks and get back in the game and get this country back up and running.
But what about the markets, everybody? The markets, my precious stock portfolio. Dan Patrick urging businesses to open prematurely. So Texans, workers in Texas, put their lives on the line. You know what, I mean, no one wants to die, right? But we gotta take some risks, my precious stock portfolio. We gotta open up, All of a sudden, when it comes to the markets, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick doesn't give a damn about human lives. And guess what? When it comes to embryos, when it comes to zygotes, when it comes to fetuses, he doesn't give a damn about those lives either. He does care about his political future though. He does care about pandering to the right-wing vote. I want to give you a little more because Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick isn't the only one who has advocated for policies during the pandemic that have gotten Texans killed. Governor Greg Abbott certainly should take some blame as well because he's the one who implemented a ban on mask mandates. Let's hear from what he had to say about his failed policies that have gotten more than 57,000 Texans killed.
The Texas Supreme Court has sided with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, temporarily blocking mask requirements issued in major school districts, including the one around Dallas. This as the number of children hospitalized with the virus hits an all-time high.
I spoke to several residents about how COVID has impacted them and what they think of the governor's decision. Take a listen to what some of these folks shared with me.
I believe it's premature, it is irresponsible, and consequently, it is placing the entire state of Texas in harm's way.
He's trying to put things back to normal, but I don't think we're ready for that. I don't know, in my mind, I'm still afraid, to be honest.
And I lost my grandfather like 3 weeks ago of COVID, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, are you really gonna open everything after everything that has been happening? A lot of people have been dying recently, and I'm like, are you serious? You're being that selfish?
Yeah, he is being that selfish. In fact, everything that these lawmakers do is selfish. It's all about self-serving nonsense that isn't meant to keep anyone safe, that isn't meant to save human lives. It's all about political gain, or in the case of reopening businesses prematurely during the pandemic, financial gain. They're precious stock portfolios, everybody. But we're supposed to sit here and pretend that these right-wing lawmakers and the morons who vote for them on this single issue genuinely care about the lives of embryos? Really? That's what they genuinely care about? While they sit back and either aid and abet what's happening in regard to the pandemic, or sit back and enjoy the fact that there are living, breathing children within the state of Texas right now who don't even have a home to live in, who are living out on the streets. Do they care about that? No, because you know what this is really about? It's about controlling women's bodies. That's what this is about. It's about punishing women for doing something that men do on a regular basis and don't have to suffer the consequences for it, having sex for pleasure. How dare they? They can't do that. And so if they're gonna make a determination that an embryo is the equivalent of a viable human being outside of a mother's womb, then I think that we should really start monitoring whether or not these men are masturbating. I mean, sperm, it's a living organism. I wanna know if we are killing those living organisms, if men are pleasuring themselves and committing mass murder. I mean, that's the ridiculous logic that these people are using to bolster the argument in favor of this disgusting new law in Texas. And shame on the federal courts for refusing to weigh in on this in time. Shame on them. But hey, you know what? I don't know. Some of these people posing as progressives or leftists told me that federal courts don't matter, that the Supreme Court doesn't matter, that they have no impact on our lives, that we shouldn't vote strategically and vote for the lesser of two evils, because who cares about the Supreme Court? It's not gonna have any impact on us, right? Real rich for people to say stuff like that while they're sitting in their $2 million homes in Los Angeles, living their privileged little lives as the rest of us suffer. And let's talk about what kids are facing in the state of Texas, where lawmakers pretend like they care about their lives. Public school data reported to the US Department of Education during the 2018 to 2019 school year shows that an estimated 114,055 public school students experienced homelessness over the course of the year. Of that total, 5,823 students were unsheltered. That means they're living on the streets. Hey, are evangelicals up in arms about that? Of course they're not. Don't hear a peep. 10,952 were in shelters, 8,159 were living in hotels and motels, and 89,121 were living with a different family, essentially doubling up. No concern about that. I mean, maybe doing something about that would hurt poor Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's stock portfolio. We gotta look out for the markets. We gotta take risks, guys. The risks are important when it comes to making sure that the privileged continue making profits. So human lives, profits, I mean, profits are always gonna come above the human lives that these lawmakers claim they care about. But at the end of the day, what makes me so furious about all of this is that these anti-choice religious zealots think that they can just position themselves as the righteous ones, as the people who care about the lives of these unborn embryos. And we know that that's not true. And hey, you know what? I mean, I made myself clear. I don't think an embryo is the same thing as an actual human life that's viable outside the womb. I made that very clear. But others might have a difference of opinion. We live in a country where if you have a religious belief or you have religious values that indicate you're not allowed to have premarital sex, don't have premarital sex. Your religion tells you you're not allowed to take birth control, don't take birth control. Your religion says that you shouldn't have an abortion, don't have an abortion. But don't try to turn this country into some sort of dictatorial regime that forces your religious beliefs on people like me. Because I don't subscribe to it, I don't believe in it. And if we're gonna go around and judge the way other countries treat their women, we should take a good hard look at how we allow this nation's religious zealots to control the lives of women who don't subscribe to their garbage.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.